Title: How Guards Handle Violent Inmates in Dallas, USA. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, subscribe, and don't forget to turn on your notification for our next real-life prison stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. The frontline reality. Managing violent inmates isn't theoretical work discussed in training manuals. It's the daily reality for correctional officers at Dallas County's Sterrett Justice Center and surrounding Texas correctional facilities. When an inmate becomes violent, threatens staff, or refuses orders, officers must make split-second decisions that balance safety, legality, and humanity. These decisions occur in environments designed for confinement, under constant scrutiny, with lives potentially hanging in the balance. Understanding how guards handle violent inmates in Dallas requires examining the institutional framework, the legal constraints, the training protocols, and the harsh realities officers face when words fail and force becomes necessary. This isn't Hollywood. This is documented procedure, real training, actual incidents, and the complex challenge of maintaining order in facilities housing some of society's most dangerous individuals. The Dallas County Correctional Landscape. The Sterrett Justice Center, commonly known as Dallas County Jail, stands as one of the largest jail systems in Texas. According to public records and facility reports, it houses thousands of inmates at any given time, ranging from individuals awaiting trial to those serving sentences for misdemeanors. The population includes gang members, individuals with severe mental illness, substance abusers, and people charged with violent crimes. Unlike prisons that house convicted offenders serving long sentences, jails like Sterrett manage a constantly rotating population. New arrestees arrive daily, many in crisis, intoxicated, experiencing withdrawal, mentally unstable, or violently resistant. This turnover creates unique challenges. Officers don't have the luxury of time to build rapport or understand individual inmates' triggers and behaviors. They must assess threats quickly and respond appropriately to individuals they've never encountered before. The facility operates under the authority of the Dallas County Sheriff's Department. According to departmental policy and Texas Commission on Jail Standards regulations, officers must follow strict protocols governing use of force, inmate interactions, and crisis intervention. These policies exist to protect both staff and inmates while maintaining institutional security and complying with constitutional requirements prohibiting cruel and unusual punishment. The legal framework governing force. Correctional officers in Dallas operate under multiple layers of legal authority and restriction. The United States Constitution, specifically the 8th Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment and the 14th Amendment's due process protections, establishes fundamental limits on how officers can treat inmates. Federal court decisions have created case law defining what constitutes excessive force and when force is legally justified. Texas state law provides additional frameworks. The Texas Penal Code allows correctional officers to use force when reasonably necessary to maintain security, prevent escape, prevent injury, or enforce institutional rules. However, the force must be proportional to the threat. An officer cannot legally respond to verbal insults with physical violence, but can use necessary force to stop an inmate attacking another person. The Dallas County Sheriff's Department maintains detailed use of force policies based on these legal requirements. According to publicly available policy documents and oversight reports, officers must follow a continuum of force, a graduated scale of responses beginning with officer presence and verbal commands, escalating through physical control techniques, less lethal weapons, and only reaching lethal force when facing an immediate threat of death or serious bodily injury. Every use of force must be documented. Officers must complete detailed reports explaining what happened, why force was necessary, what level of force was used, and what injuries resulted. Supervisors review these reports. Serious incidents trigger investigations by internal affairs divisions. Video footage from facility cameras, when available, provides objective documentation of what occurred. This documentation serves multiple purposes. It creates accountability, ensures constitutional compliance, provides evidence if legal challenges arise, and allows institutional review to identify training needs or policy improvements. The paperwork burden is substantial, but it's legally and ethically necessary. The violence statistics. Violence in correctional facilities isn't rare. It's a persistent occupational hazard. According to data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics and reports from correctional systems nationwide, assaults on staff occur regularly in jails and prisons. Officers face risks ranging from verbal threats to physical attacks, including punches, kicks, bites, being struck with makeshift weapons, and exposure to bodily fluids. Dallas County facilities experienced this reality. News reports and public records document numerous incidents where officers have been assaulted by inmates. In some documented cases, officers suffered serious injuries requiring hospitalization. The threat is real, present, and part of the job officers accept when they enter corrections work. Inmate-on-inmate violence presents another challenge officers must manage. Fights erupt over territory, disrespect, gang conflicts, gambling debts, or personal disputes. When violence breaks out, officers must intervene quickly to prevent serious injury or death. This intervention puts officers at risk. Breaking up a fight between two or more violent individuals is inherently dangerous. Mental health crises contribute significantly to violent incidents. According to studies by criminal justice researchers and reports from mental health advocacy organizations, a substantial percentage of jail inmates have diagnosable mental illnesses. During acute psychiatric crises, individuals may become violent, self-harm, or pose threats to staff attempting to help them. Officers must manage these situations despite often having limited mental health training. Substance withdrawal creates additional volatility. Individuals arrested while using drugs or alcohol enter facilities and begin withdrawal, which can trigger aggressive behavior, hallucinations, or medical emergencies. Officers must recognize these symptoms and respond appropriately, balancing security concerns with medical needs. The training foundation. Before Dallas County correctional officers face violent inmates, they undergo training designed to prepare them for these challenges. According to Texas Commission on Jail Standards requirements and Dallas County Sheriff's Department training protocols, officers must complete basic jailer certification courses covering legal authorities, facility procedures, crisis intervention, and defensive tactics. Defensive tactics training teaches officers physical techniques for controlling resistant or violent inmates. This includes restraint holds, takedown techniques, handcuffing methods, and defensive movements to protect against strikes. The training emphasizes using the minimum force necessary to achieve control while minimizing injury risk to both officer and inmate. Crisis intervention training, or CIT, has become increasingly important in modern corrections. This specialized training teaches officers to recognize signs of mental illness, understand how psychiatric crises manifest, and use verbal de-escalation techniques to resolve situations without force. According to mental health advocates and correctional reform organizations, CIT-trained officers are better equipped to manage mentally ill inmates safely. Scenario-based training creates realistic simulations where officers practice responses to violent situations. These scenarios might include an inmate refusing to lock down, an inmate attacking another inmate, or an inmate threatening self-harm. Officers practice verbal commands, positioning, force options, and team coordination in controlled environments before facing real incidents. Despite this training, the reality remains that no amount of preparation fully replicates the chaos, danger, and split-second decision-making required when violence erupts in an actual facility. Training provides tools and frameworks, but real-world application demands judgment developed through experience. The de-escalation priority. Modern correctional philosophy emphasizes de-escalation as the preferred first response to potentially violent situations. Before resorting to physical force, officers attempt to resolve conflicts through communication, creating what researchers and practitioners call dynamic security. De-escalation techniques include speaking calmly to agitated inmates, maintaining non-threatening body language, offering choices when possible, showing respect, and trying to understand what triggered the behavior. According to corrections research and training materials, officers trained in these techniques can often defuse situations that might otherwise escalate to violence. The approach requires patience and skill. An officer facing a screaming, threatening inmate must remain calm, assess whether the inmate poses an immediate threat, and attempt verbal intervention. Simple questions: what's wrong? How can I help? What do you need? Can sometimes redirect an inmate's focus and reduce tension. Giving inmates some control within boundaries can be effective. Instead of demanding immediate compliance, an officer might offer limited choices. You can lock down now, or you can have 5 minutes in the day room first. This preserves the officer's authority while giving the inmate agency, potentially reducing resistance. However, de-escalation has limits. When an inmate is actively violent, assaulting another person, destroying property, or attacking staff, verbal intervention isn't sufficient. Officers must act immediately to protect lives and maintain security. The skill lies in recognizing which situations allow time for de-escalation and which require immediate physical intervention. When words fail, The use of force continuum. When de-escalation proves unsuccessful or isn't appropriate given the immediate threat, Dallas County officers follow the use of force continuum, a graduated response framework guiding how officers escalate their response based on inmate behavior. The continuum begins with officer presence. Simply having uniformed officers visible can deter some misconduct. If presence alone doesn't work, officers issue verbal commands, clear, direct orders telling the inmate what to do. If verbal commands fail, officers may employ soft hands techniques, physical contact without strikes. This includes escort holds, pressure point control, and joint manipulation to guide or restrain non-compliant inmates. These techniques cause discomfort to encourage compliance but aren't intended to cause injury. Hard hands techniques come next. More forceful physical interventions including strikes, takedowns, and restraint techniques designed to overcome active resistance. Officers use these when inmates physically resist, fight back, or pose threats requiring immediate control. Less lethal weapons represent another tier. These include chemical agents like pepper spray, conducted energy weapons like tasers, and impact weapons like batons. According to use of force policies and law enforcement research, these tools provide options between empty hand techniques and lethal force, allowing officers to stop dangerous behavior from a distance or overcome violent resistance without resorting to firearms. Lethal force sits atop the continuum, justified only when officers face imminent threats of death or serious bodily injury. In jail settings, lethal force situations are rare but can occur. An inmate armed with a weapon attacking staff or other inmates, hostage situations, or attempted escapes involving deadly threats. The continuum isn't rigidly sequential. Officers don't always start at step 1 and progress gradually. If an inmate suddenly attacks with a weapon, officers may immediately use force appropriate to that threat level. The continuum provides a framework for proportional response, not a mandatory script. The reality of cell extractions. One of the most challenging scenarios Dallas County officers face is the cell extraction, forcibly removing a non-compliant inmate from a locked cell. These situations arise when inmates refuse to exit cells for court, refuse medical treatment, destroy cell property, or barricade themselves inside. According to correctional training materials and documented procedures, cell extractions follow specific protocols. Officers assemble an extraction team, typically 5 to 6 trained personnel. Each team member has an assigned role: control different parts of the inmate's body, apply restraints, provide video documentation, or coordinate the operation. Before extraction, officers attempt verbal persuasion. A supervisor typically communicates with the inmate, explaining consequences of continued non-compliance and offering opportunities to comply voluntarily. If the inmate refuses, officers brief the extraction plan, don protective equipment including helmets and shields, and prepare less lethal options like pepper spray. The extraction itself is violent by necessity. Officers breach the cell door, deploy chemical agents if authorized, and physically rush the inmate. The goal is overwhelming force applied quickly to achieve control before the inmate can effectively resist or injure team members. Officers pin the inmate, apply restraints, and remove them from the cell. These operations carry significant injury risk. Inmates may fight violently, knowing they face overwhelming numbers. Officers can be injured by strikes, bites, or thrown objects. Inmates can be injured during the takedown or restraint process. The entire incident is typically recorded on video for documentation and review. Cell extractions represent the institutional reality that sometimes violent force is the only option remaining when inmates refuse all other interventions and pose threats that cannot be ignored or negotiated away. The burden of accountability. Every use of force in Dallas County facilities triggers accountability mechanisms. Officers complete detailed reports. Supervisors review video footage. Medical staff examine inmates for injuries. Internal affairs investigators scrutinize serious incidents. This oversight aims to ensure force was legally justified, properly applied, and thoroughly documented. Officers operate knowing their actions face scrutiny. Body cameras, cell cameras, and facility surveillance systems record incidents. Fellow officers witness events. Inmates file grievances and lawsuits. Media request records. Civil rights organizations monitor jail conditions. This constant oversight creates pressure but also protects both officers and inmates by creating objective records of what occurred. The legal liability is real. Officers who use excessive force face potential criminal prosecution, civil lawsuits, and termination. Departments face federal civil rights investigations if patterns of abuse emerge. These consequences incentivize proper training, appropriate force application, and honest documentation. Yet officers also deserve protection when they use lawful force in dangerous situations. The threat is real. The violence is real. The split-second decisions are real. Judging officers' actions requires understanding the circumstances they faced, the information available at the time, and the genuine dangers inherent in corrections work. Managing violent inmates in Dallas represents the complex intersection of legal authority, institutional security, human safety, and constitutional rights. Officers carry the burden of making these decisions correctly, every time, under pressure with lives at stake. This is the frontline reality. Tools, tactics, and team response. When verbal commands fail and an inmate's violent behavior escalates beyond what individual officers can safely control, Dallas County correctional officers rely on specialized tools, coordinated tactics, and team-based response systems. Understanding how guards handle violent inmates requires examining the specific equipment authorized for use, the tactical procedures governing emergency responses, and the organizational structures that coordinate officer actions during critical incidents. This chapter explores the physical tools officers carry, the chemical and electronic weapons available for less lethal force, the protective equipment that shields officers during violent encounters, and the specialized response teams trained for the most dangerous situations. Everything discussed is based on documented correctional practices, publicly available policies, and verified reporting on jail operations. The officers' equipment loadout. Dallas County correctional officers carry specific equipment designed to help them maintain control without immediately resorting to deadly force. According to standard correctional practices and equipment authorized by jail policies, officers typically have access to several categories of tools. Restraint devices form the foundation of correctional equipment. Handcuffs remain the primary tool for securing inmates during transport, cell extractions, or when immediate physical control is necessary. Modern handcuffs are designed to restrict movement while minimizing injury when properly applied. Officers receive training on proper handcuffing techniques, positioning, tightness, and double-locking mechanisms that prevent cuffs from over-tightening and causing nerve damage or circulation problems. Leg restraints and full-body restraint systems provide additional options for extremely violent or resistant inmates. These devices, sometimes called hobble restraints or wrap systems, immobilize inmates who continue fighting even after being handcuffed. According to use of force policies and correctional training materials, these restraints must be applied carefully to prevent positional asphyxiation, a potentially fatal condition where restrained individuals cannot breathe properly due to body positioning. Communication devices are critical safety equipment. Officers carry radios allowing instant communication with control rooms and fellow officers. During violent incidents, the ability to immediately call for backup can mean the difference between a controlled response and a tragedy. Modern jail systems employ sophisticated radio networks with emergency buttons that automatically transmit distress signals and officer locations. Personal protective equipment varies by facility and assignment. Officers working in high-risk areas or on specialized teams may wear stab-resistant vests designed to protect against improvised weapons. During planned cell extractions or riot response, officers don helmets with face shields, arm and leg padding, and reinforced gloves. This equipment allows officers to enter violent situations with reduced injury risk, enabling them to perform necessary extractions and interventions. Chemical agents and their application. Oleoresin capsicum, commonly known as pepper spray or OC spray, represents one of the most frequently used less lethal force options in correctional settings. According to law enforcement and correctional research, OC spray causes intense burning sensations in eyes, nose, throat, and skin, temporarily incapacitating individuals and allowing officers to gain control. Dallas County facilities, like most modern jails, authorize OC spray use under specific circumstances. Policies typically permit deployment when inmates actively resist physical control, pose threats to themselves or others, or refuse to comply with lawful orders after other interventions have failed. The spray provides a distance option. Officers can deploy it from several feet away, reducing the need for immediate physical contact with violent inmates. Application techniques matter significantly. Officers receive training on proper deployment distance, spray patterns, and duration. Short bursts aimed at the face achieve the desired effect while minimizing total exposure. Wind conditions matter in outdoor areas. Officers must position themselves to avoid self-contamination or affecting uninvolved inmates. Decontamination procedures follow OC deployment. According to medical protocols and correctional standards, affected individuals need fresh air, water to flush exposed areas, and medical evaluation. The effects typically subside within 30 to 45 minutes, though discomfort can persist longer. Officers must balance OC spray's effectiveness against the need for subsequent medical care and the potential for complications in individuals with respiratory conditions. Chemical agent use carries legal and ethical considerations. Courts have scrutinized cases where OC spray was used punitively rather than for legitimate security purposes. Spraying a restrained inmate who poses no active threat, or using chemicals to retaliate for verbal insults, constitutes excessive force and violates constitutional protections. Documentation requirements ensure each deployment can be legally justified. Conducted energy weapons. Conducted energy weapons, commonly known by the brand name taser, deliver electrical current that temporarily disrupts voluntary muscle control. According to manufacturer specifications and law enforcement research, these devices cause neuromuscular incapacitation, rendering individuals temporarily unable to control their movements regardless of pain tolerance or mental state. The technology works through two small probes fired from the device, trailing thin wires. When both probes make contact with the target, completing an electrical circuit, the current flows through the body causing involuntary muscle contractions. The effect is immediate and dramatic. Individuals typically fall to the ground, unable to maintain balance or resist officers. Correctional facilities' policies on CW use vary. Some jails authorize tasers for situations involving violent inmates who pose immediate threats. The devices provide an option between hands-on physical force and firearms, potentially reducing injury to both officers and inmates. However, CW deployment carries risks that policies must address. Medical concerns include the potential for cardiac effects, fall injuries, and probe penetration injuries. According to medical research and product safety data, while rare, serious complications can occur, particularly in individuals with heart conditions or those under the influence of stimulant drugs, policies typically prohibit deployment in certain circumstances. On pregnant women near stairways where falls could cause severe injury, or on individuals in positions where incapacitation could lead to serious harm. Documentation requirements for CW use mirror those for other force applications. Officers must justify deployment, document the incident thoroughly, ensure medical evaluation of affected individuals, and retain electronic records from the device itself, which logs each deployment with timestamp data. Impact weapons and their limitations. Batons, expandable impact weapons, and similar tools provide officers with options for delivering controlled strikes to overcome violent resistance. According to defensive tactics training and use of force policies, impact weapons target specific body areas, large muscle groups like thighs or upper arms, while avoiding vulnerable areas like heads, necks, spines, and joints where strikes could cause serious injury or death. The training emphasizes that impact weapons are tools for gaining compliance from actively resistant or assaultive inmates, not instruments of punishment. An officer may strike an inmate's leg to stop a charge or deliver arm strikes to break a fighting stance, but cannot legally beat a compliant or restrained individual. Correctional facilities must balance impact weapons' utility against their risk. These tools can cause significant injury, broken bones, lacerations, internal bleeding, particularly if used improperly. Officer training focuses on proper striking techniques, target area selection, and recognizing when strikes aren't achieving the desired effect and alternative methods are needed. In modern corrections, impact weapon use has declined as other less lethal options like OC spray and CWs have become available. These alternatives often provide effective control with potentially lower injury risks. However, impact weapons remain relevant when other options have failed or aren't available, and when officers need immediate tools to defend against violent attacks. Specialized response teams. When situations exceed individual officers' capacity to respond safely, riots, hostage situations, multiple simultaneous violent incidents, Dallas County facilities rely on specialized response teams. These units, sometimes called Special Operations Response Teams or Correctional Emergency Response Teams, consist of officers who receive advanced training in tactical operations, use of force, crisis management, and team coordination. According to correctional best practices and team operational protocols, SORT or CERT members train regularly in scenarios that ordinary officers might face once or never in their careers. They practice cell extractions, riot control formations, hostage rescue procedures, and coordinated uses of force. This specialized training creates a cadre of officers capable of handling the most dangerous situations that arise in correctional facilities. Team composition typically includes specific roles. A team leader coordinates operations and makes tactical decisions. Shield officers carry protective barriers and lead entries into dangerous areas. Less lethal weapons specialists deploy chemical agents, projectiles, or other tools. Arrest and control officers physically restrain inmates once initial contact is made. Medical personnel accompany teams to provide immediate care for injuries. Deployment protocols govern when specialized teams activate. Major disturbances, planned high-risk extractions, or situations where standard officer response proves insufficient trigger team callouts. The team assembles, receives briefing on the situation, develops a tactical plan, and executes the operation under supervisor oversight. The presence of specialized teams creates institutional capacity to respond to worst-case scenarios. When riots erupted at correctional facilities across the country, as documented in news reports and official investigations, specialized response teams restored order. Their training, equipment, and coordination allow them to confront mass violence that would overwhelm regular officers. Coordinated response procedures. Violent incidents in Dallas County facilities trigger coordinated institutional responses involving multiple staff members and departments. Understanding this coordination reveals how modern jails manage crisis situations systematically rather than relying solely on individual officer reactions. When an officer encounters violence, an assault in progress, an inmate refusing extraction, or a fight, the first step is calling for assistance. Officers activate emergency radio buttons or verbally request backup. Control room operators hear these calls and immediately dispatch additional officers to the location while alerting supervisors. Responding officers follow approach protocols based on their training. They assess the situation upon arrival, coordinate with the initial officer, and implement appropriate interventions. If the situation involves active violence requiring immediate action, officers may rush in to separate combatants or restrain violent individuals. If the situation is contained but tense, officers may establish a perimeter and attempt de-escalation while additional resources arrive. Supervisor presence is critical. Policies typically require supervisors to respond to significant use of force incidents. Supervisors assess whether officers are using appropriate force levels, coordinate team responses, make decisions about deploying specialized equipment or teams, and ensure proper documentation. Medical staff activation occurs simultaneously. When violence results in injuries, medical personnel must respond to treat both inmates and staff. The coordination between security and medical staff requires balancing treatment needs against security concerns. Medical staff need access to injured individuals, but security must ensure medical personnel aren't endangered by ongoing violence. Video documentation captures incidents as they unfold. Control room operators direct cameras toward incident locations, creating objective records. In facilities equipped with body cameras, officers' perspective footage supplements fixed camera views. This documentation serves multiple purposes: evidence for disciplinary or criminal proceedings, material for training review, and protection for officers who used appropriate force. Post-incident procedures begin immediately. Officers complete use of force reports documenting what occurred, why force was necessary, what techniques were employed, and what injuries resulted. Inmates receive medical evaluation even if they claim no injury. This protects both inmates' health and creates documentation if they later allege injury. Supervisors review reports and video, ensuring consistency and identifying any policy violations or training needs. The challenge of mental health crises. A significant portion of violent incidents in Dallas County facilities involve inmates experiencing mental health crises rather than making calculated decisions to attack staff or other inmates. According to mental health research and corrections data, jails have become de facto mental health facilities, housing individuals with serious psychiatric conditions who might have previously received treatment in dedicated mental health institutions. Officers face unique challenges managing mentally ill inmates in crisis. Traditional security responses, verbal commands, shows of force, physical restraint, may escalate situations involving individuals experiencing psychotic episodes, severe anxiety, or other psychiatric emergencies. An inmate hallucinating and lashing out at perceived threats doesn't respond rationally to officer commands. Crisis intervention training attempts to address this challenge. CIT-trained officers learn to recognize mental illness symptoms, understand how psychiatric conditions affect behavior, and employ de-escalation techniques specifically designed for mental health crises. According to CIT program evaluations and mental health advocacy research, trained officers resolve situations more safely and reduce both use of force incidents and injuries. The techniques differ from standard security approaches. Officers might create distance rather than immediately closing with an agitated inmate, speak more slowly and simply, avoid sudden movements that could trigger defensive reactions, and allow more time for verbal de-escalation before resorting to force. If force becomes necessary, officers try to minimize trauma to already vulnerable individuals. Facilities increasingly employ mental health professionals who respond alongside security staff during psychiatric crises. These professionals can assess inmates' mental states, communicate using therapeutic techniques, and recommend interventions. Their presence creates options beyond purely security-focused responses, though officers must still ensure safety for everyone involved. The reality of improvised weapons. Inmates lacking access to conventional weapons demonstrate remarkable ingenuity in creating dangerous improvised tools. Officers in Dallas County facilities regularly encounter shanks fashioned from metal, plastic, or other materials, clubs made from rolled magazines or pillowcases filled with batteries or soap, ligatures for strangulation, and projectiles ranging from food trays to bodily fluids. These weapons, documented in facility seizure reports and incident investigations, create genuine threats. A sharpened piece of metal can cause life-threatening injuries. An inmate with a club can fracture bones or cause head trauma. Officers must treat these improvised weapons as seriously as conventional weapons when making force decisions. Detection and prevention require constant vigilance. Officers conduct cell searches looking for contraband and weapon-making materials. Facility design eliminates or secures potential weapon sources. Classification systems separate violent inmates from general population. Despite these efforts, determined inmates still create weapons, requiring officers to remain alert and prepared to respond. When officers encounter armed inmates, their response escalates appropriately. Policies and training authorize higher force levels against armed threats. An officer facing an inmate with a shank may immediately deploy OC spray, a CW, or take defensive positions and call specialized teams rather than attempting hands-on control. The presence of weapons justifies force that would be excessive against an unarmed, nonviolent inmate. The tools, tactics, and teams employed by Dallas County officers represent sophisticated systems developed over decades of correctional practice. These systems aim to maintain security while minimizing unnecessary harm, a difficult balance requiring proper equipment, thorough training, clear policies, and professional judgment under pressure. Consequences, accountability, and the path forward. The aftermath of violent encounters in Dallas County correctional facilities extends far beyond the immediate incident. Every use of force triggers consequences, for inmates who were subjected to it, for officers who applied it, and for the institution responsible for ensuring both groups' rights are protected. This final chapter examines the accountability mechanisms governing officer conduct, the legal and administrative consequences of excessive force, the ongoing challenges facing Dallas County facilities, and the reform efforts attempting to reduce violence while maintaining security. Understanding how guards handle violent inmates isn't complete without examining what happens after the handcuffs are applied, after the incident reports are filed, and after the cameras stop recording. The systems of oversight, investigation, discipline, and litigation shape how officers perform their duties and whether facilities operate constitutionally. Documentation and immediate review. Every use of force in Dallas County facilities begins a documentation process designed to create accountability and transparency. According to standard correctional procedures and legal requirements established through court cases and oversight mandates, officers must complete detailed written reports immediately following any physical intervention beyond basic escort holds or handcuffing. These reports require officers to describe the incident chronologically, what behaviors the inmate exhibited, what verbal commands were given, why force became necessary, what specific techniques were employed, how much force was used, when the force stopped, and what injuries occurred. The reports must explain the officer's thought process and justify each escalation in force level. Supervisors review these reports within hours of the incident. According to administrative procedures and chain-of-command protocols, supervisors compare officer narratives to video footage when available, interview witnesses including other officers and inmates, examine physical evidence, and assess whether the force used appears justified and proportional to the threat faced. Medical documentation runs parallel to security documentation. Healthcare staff examine inmates who were subjected to force, documenting all injuries regardless of severity. Photographs capture visible injuries. Medical records note complaints of pain even when no visible injury appears. This medical documentation serves multiple purposes, ensuring inmates receive necessary treatment, creating objective injury records, and providing evidence if allegations of excessive force arise. The combination of officer reports, supervisor reviews, video footage, and medical documentation creates a comprehensive record of what occurred. This record becomes critical if the incident faces further scrutiny through internal investigations, legal proceedings, or external oversight. Internal affairs investigations. Serious use of force incidents, allegations of officer misconduct, or situations where injuries suggest force may have been excessive trigger internal affairs investigations. According to law enforcement administrative procedures and accountability protocols, internal affairs divisions conduct thorough investigations independent of the chain of command involved in the incident. Investigators interview all involved parties. Officers provide detailed statements explaining their actions. Inmates describe their perspectives on what occurred. Witness officers and inmates offer their observations. Medical staff explain injury patterns and their consistency with reported events. Video analysts examine footage frame by frame. The investigation seeks to answer specific questions. Was force necessary given the inmate's behavior? Was the force level proportional to the threat? Did officers follow departmental policies and training? Were verbal warnings given when time permitted? Was force stopped once the inmate was controlled? Were required notifications made and reports completed properly? Investigation findings fall into several categories. Findings may exonerate officers, determining their actions were appropriate and within policy. Findings may identify policy violations requiring corrective action or discipline. Findings may substantiate excessive force allegations, leading to serious consequences including termination and potential criminal charges. The timeline for internal investigations varies based on complexity. Simple cases might conclude within weeks. Complex incidents involving multiple officers, conflicting accounts, and serious injuries can take months. During investigations, officers may be placed on administrative leave if allegations are particularly serious. Legal consequences and civil litigation. Officers who use excessive force face potential legal consequences in both criminal and civil courts. The criminal justice system can prosecute officers for assault, battery, or civil rights violations under federal law when force exceeds legal justification. According to legal precedent and prosecution standards, criminal charges require proof that officers willfully violated inmates' rights, not merely that mistakes occurred. Prosecutions of correctional officers remain relatively rare compared to the frequency of force incidents. Prosecutors face challenges proving criminal intent and overcoming qualified immunity doctrines that shield officers acting in good faith. However, egregious cases, beatings captured on video, sustained attacks on restrained inmates, or force resulting in serious injury without justification, can result in criminal charges, convictions, and imprisonment. Civil litigation is far more common. Inmates file lawsuits under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, the federal civil rights statute allowing individuals to sue government officials who violate constitutional rights. According to court records and legal research, excessive force claims constitute a significant portion of inmate litigation against jail systems. These lawsuits proceed through federal courts following established procedures. Inmates must exhaust administrative grievance processes before filing. Courts apply objective reasonableness standards, whether a reasonable officer in similar circumstances would have used similar force. Video evidence, medical records, expert testimony from corrections professionals, and departmental policies all become evidence in these cases. Outcomes vary dramatically. Many lawsuits are dismissed early when courts determine force was justified or inmates cannot prove constitutional violations. Cases that survive dismissal may settle. Counties pay monetary compensation to avoid trial costs and potential adverse verdicts. Cases that reach trial result in either plaintiff verdicts awarding damages or defense verdicts vindicating officers' actions. Significant verdicts or settlement amounts create financial incentives for institutional reform. Counties paying millions in excessive force settlements face pressure to improve training, revise policies, enhance supervision, and address systemic problems contributing to constitutional violations. Disciplinary actions and career consequences. Officers found to have violated policies face administrative discipline ranging from verbal counseling to termination. According to civil service rules and law enforcement employment standards, Discipline must be proportional to the offense and follow due process procedures. Minor policy violations might result in counseling or written reprimands. These create documentation but don't immediately threaten employment. Officers receive direction to correct deficient performance and warnings that repeated violations will lead to serious consequences. Suspensions without pay punish more serious violations. An officer who used force that violated policy but didn't rise to criminal conduct might face days or weeks of suspension. The lost income creates financial consequences while allowing the officer to potentially return to duty after serving the suspension. Termination represents the ultimate administrative sanction. Officers who commit serious policy violations, use clearly excessive force, or demonstrate patterns of misconduct face dismissal. According to employment law and civil service protections, terminated officers often appeal through administrative hearing processes. Some terminations are upheld on appeal. Others are overturned if due process wasn't followed or evidence doesn't support the discipline. Career consequences extend beyond immediate discipline. Officers terminated for excessive force face severe obstacles to future law enforcement employment. Certification boards may revoke or suspend peace officer licenses. Background checks reveal termination history. Professional reputations suffer lasting damage. These consequences create deterrent effects. Officers aware that excessive force can end careers have incentives to follow training, use appropriate force levels, and prioritize de-escalation. However, the consequences must be applied consistently to maintain credibility. Selective enforcement or protecting favored officers undermines accountability. The challenge of officer wellness. Managing violent inmates exacts psychological and physical tolls on correctional officers that institutions are increasingly recognizing and attempting to address. According to occupational health research and correctional workforce studies, officers experience high rates of post-traumatic stress, depression, substance abuse, and physical health problems related to job stress. The constant threat of violence creates chronic stress. Officers remain vigilant throughout shifts, aware that situations can explode into violence with little warning. This sustained alertness, similar to what combat soldiers experience, contributes to burnout and mental health challenges. Actual violent encounters, even when officers use appropriate force and control situations successfully, can be traumatic. Officers injured in attacks face physical recovery and potential psychological impacts. Officers who use significant force, particularly if inmates are seriously injured, may experience guilt, second-guessing, and moral injury even when their actions were legally and ethically justified. Progressive correctional systems implement officer wellness programs addressing these challenges. Peer support teams allow officers to discuss difficult incidents with colleagues who understand the work. Employee assistance programs provide confidential counseling. Critical incident stress debriefings help officers process traumatic events. Physical fitness and stress management programs address health impacts. These wellness initiatives serve dual purposes. They help officers maintain mental and physical health, and they potentially improve performance. Officers managing their own stress more effectively may respond to inmate crises more professionally, use de-escalation more successfully, and apply force more judiciously when necessary. Ongoing challenges in Dallas facilities. Despite policies, training, and oversight, Dallas County facilities face persistent challenges managing violent inmates. Staffing shortages, documented in news reports and county budget discussions, mean officers work overtime, supervise too many inmates, and lack backup during incidents. Fatigue and understaffing increase risks for both officers and inmates. Mental health resources remain inadequate despite growing recognition of the problem. According to mental health advocacy organizations and oversight reports, jails lack sufficient psychiatric beds, mental health staff, and specialized housing for seriously mentally ill inmates. Officers continue managing psychiatric crises with limited support, increasing the likelihood of violent confrontations. Facility design in older sections creates security challenges. Blind spots beyond camera coverage, inadequate separation between officers and violent inmates, and infrastructure that facilitates weapon manufacturing all contribute to violence. Modernizing facilities requires significant capital investment that budget constraints often limit. Gang activity within facilities generates ongoing violence that officers must manage. According to law enforcement intelligence and facility incident reports, gang members continue disputes from the streets, recruit new members inside, and use violence to establish dominance. Officers must navigate complex gang dynamics while maintaining order. Substance abuse and withdrawal remain prevalent. Individuals arrested while intoxicated or using drugs enter facilities and experience withdrawal or ongoing effects of substances, contributing to violent, unpredictable behavior. Medical detoxification resources are often insufficient, leaving officers to manage inmates in acute distress. Reform efforts and evidence-based practices. Recognizing these challenges, Dallas County and correctional systems nationwide are implementing reforms aimed at reducing violence while maintaining security. These reforms reflect evidence-based practices that research and experience have shown can improve outcomes. Enhanced mental health screening at intake identifies individuals needing specialized housing or services. Early identification allows facilities to place mentally ill inmates in appropriate settings with additional support, potentially preventing crisis situations that lead to force. Expanded crisis intervention training increases the percentage of officers equipped to manage psychiatric emergencies. According to program evaluations and research studies, facilities with higher rates of CIT-trained officers experience fewer use-of-force incidents involving mentally ill inmates and fewer injuries to both staff and inmates. Body-worn cameras create objective documentation of officer-inmate interactions. Research on body camera impacts in law enforcement and corrections shows mixed results, but documentation benefits include improved evidence for investigations, potential deterrent effects on excessive force, and protection for officers falsely accused of misconduct. Use-of-force policy reviews examine whether current policies reflect best practices or need updating. Some jurisdictions have banned or restricted certain techniques linked to serious injuries or deaths. For example, limiting prone restraint duration to prevent positional asphyxiation, or restricting pepper spray use in confined spaces. Early intervention systems identify officers who may be struggling before situations become critical. These systems track metrics including use-of-force frequency, complaint rates, and sick leave patterns. Officers showing concerning patterns receive intervention, additional training, counseling, or reassignment before their performance deteriorates further. Inmate programming and purposeful activity reduce institutional violence. According to correctional research and facility studies, inmates engaged in educational programs, work assignments, religious services, and recreation exhibit less violent behavior than those confined in cells with nothing to do. Boredom and frustration contribute to violence. Constructive activity reduces it. The balance between security and humanity. The fundamental challenge facing Dallas County correctional officers and administrators is balancing legitimate security needs against constitutional requirements and basic humanity. Inmates retain constitutional rights despite incarceration. The 8th Amendment prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. The 14th Amendment requires due process. Officers must maintain order and safety while respecting these rights. This balance is difficult and imperfect. Situations arise where no perfect option exists. Only choices between bad outcomes and worse outcomes. An officer facing a violently psychotic inmate may have no good alternatives, only the necessity to stop dangerous behavior while trying to minimize harm. Public expectations compound the challenge. Communities demand safe jails where inmates cannot harm staff, escape, or continue criminal activities. Simultaneously, communities demand humane treatment, constitutional compliance, and accountability when force is misused. Officers operate in this tension, expected to be both warriors and caregivers, enforcers and social workers. The path forward requires continued evolution of policies, training, equipment, and institutional culture. It requires adequate funding for staffing, mental health services, facility improvements, and officer wellness. It requires honest assessment of what works and what doesn't, willingness to adopt evidence-based practices, and commitment to accountability when standards are violated. Managing violent inmates in Dallas County correctional facilities represents one of society's most difficult challenges. Protecting public safety while honoring human dignity, maintaining order while respecting rights, using necessary force while preventing abuse. The officers who do this work daily, the administrators who develop policies, and the oversight bodies who ensure accountability all share responsibility for getting this balance right. The consequences of failure, for inmates, officers, and communities, are too serious to accept anything less than continuous improvement toward that difficult goal.